This is the story of a woman who was one missed payment away from losing everything. A woman who did everything right. She went to college, got a job she loved, bought a home for her daughter, and still found herself drowning. If you have ever worked harder than everyone around you and somehow ended up with less, this story is for you. Stay with me all the way through, because what Sarah Jenkins discovered in a coffee shop at 11 o'clock at night is about to change the way you think about money forever. Before we go any further, if this kind of story resonates with you, stories about real people making real financial changes, hit the subscribe button right now and drop a comment below. Tell me one word that describes your financial situation today. Just one word. I read every single one. Now, let's talk about Sarah. Sarah Jenkins was 32 years old, living in Renton, Washington, a suburb about 12 miles southeast of Seattle. She woke up every morning at 6:15, made a lunch she had packed the night before, dropped her 7-year-old daughter at the school bus stop, and drove to Sunshine Kids Academy, where she spent the next 8 hours reading to children who were not her own. She loved those kids. She loved her job. She was exactly the kind of teacher every parent hopes their child gets: warm, patient, relentless in her belief that every child deserves to be seen. But Sarah was not seen, not by the financial system she was trying so desperately to survive inside of. Her salary was $41,000 a year before taxes. After federal withholding, after her contribution to the school district's pension plan, after health insurance premiums for herself and Maya, her take-home was just under $2,800 a month. In the greater Seattle metro area, $2,800 a month is not money. It is a starting point for a negotiation you are already losing. She had bought her house 3 years earlier, in 2021, during a moment of cautious optimism. A small 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with a yard for Maya and a bus line 2 blocks away. Her realtor had called it a starter home. Her mortgage broker had walked her through the numbers with a smile that felt genuine. The rate was adjustable. It seemed manageable at the time. It seemed manageable until it wasn't. By the fall of 2024, her monthly mortgage payment had climbed from $940 to $1,420. That single increase wiped out everything Sarah had quietly saved over 2 years. She started putting groceries on a credit card, then Maya's school supplies. Then utility balance grew in small, quiet increments, the way water fills a basement. Too slow to panic about until suddenly everything is underwater. She took the coffee shop job in October, barista, 4 evenings a week, closing shift at 11. It brought in an extra $600 a month when tips were decent. It also meant Maya spent 3 nights a week at the neighbor Diane's house, and Sarah spent those midnight drives home calculating how many more months she could hold on. The answer, she would learn from her mortgage servicer on a gray Tuesday morning in November, was 3. 3 months before foreclosure proceedings would begin. She sat in her car in the school parking lot for 20 minutes before she could make her legs work enough to go inside. That was the bottom. And sometimes the bottom is exactly where things begin. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday night just before closing time, a woman sat down at the counter and ordered a decaf Americano and a slice of lemon pound cake. She was in her late 60s, maybe 70, with gray hair cut short and the kind of posture that suggested she spent decades sitting at a desk where real decisions were made. Her name was Clara. She came in most Wednesdays. Sarah had always exchanged pleasantries with her. Tonight was different. Sarah was doing the mental math again, quietly, but not quietly enough. Clara heard her. Clara set down her coffee, and Clara asked a question that nobody had ever asked Sarah before. She said, "What are you actually keeping?" Sarah didn't understand. Clara said it again. Of everything that comes in, your salary, your tips, your second job, what are you actually keeping at the end of the month? Sarah told her the truth. She told her about the adjustable rate mortgage, the credit card balance, the 3 months. She told her all of it, standing behind a counter at 10:45 at night, and she did not cry, which surprised her. Clara listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stopped Sarah completely. She said, "Don't look at the money you earn. Look at the money you keep after greed and vanity walk away." Sarah almost laughed. She said she didn't have any greed and vanity. She was barely surviving. Clara smiled in a way that was not unkind. She said, "That is what everyone says right before they discover $300 a month they didn't know they were spending." Clara had spent 30 years as chief financial officer for a national retail chain. She had watched companies collapse, not because they lacked revenue, but because they had no relationship with their own money. They earned generously, they spent carelessly, they never once asked what they were actually keeping. She had seen the same pattern in household after household. She had lived a version of it herself at 29 before someone handed her a mirror and made her look. For the next 20 minutes, Clara drew a diagram on a napkin. 3 circles: needs, wants, savings, and investment. 50%, 30%, 20%. She called it the 50-30-20 rule, and she explained it not as a budget in the way Sarah had always understood budgets, as a kind of punishment, a list of things you could no longer have, but as a system, a machine, a framework that followed with discipline would show Sarah exactly where her money was going and give her the power to redirect it. 50% for needs. Housing, utilities, groceries, transportation, insurance, Maya's essential expenses, everything that kept the lights on and the family fed. For Sarah, on $2,800 a month, that ceiling was $1,400. Her mortgage alone was consuming everything in that bucket and then some. Something had to change. Not later, not when things got better, now. 30% for wants. Clara said most people underestimate this number, not because they are extravagant, but because they are unconscious. 3 streaming services, at least one of which Sarah hadn't opened in 4 months. The subscription meal kit she had paused but never fully canceled. The Amazon purchases that arrived at the door without any memory being ordered. The coffee she bought at other coffee shops on her days off from the coffee shop where she worked. Clara called this category the bleed. Slow, invisible, relentless. 20% for savings and investment. Clara was clear about this, not optional, not what was left over after everything else. First, automatic, before the want money had a chance to become something else. Sarah looked at the napkin and said she could not possibly do 20% savings on her income. There was nothing left. Clara nodded. She said that was fine. She said to start with $50 a week, not a month, a week. $200 a month going into a low-cost index fund, a total market fund, something boring, something that had returned an average of 9 to 10% annually over the last century, whether anyone was watching or not. She told Sarah to open a Roth IRA because the growth would be tax-free and because on her income she qualified comfortably within the annual contribution limits. And then Clara said the thing that mattered most. She said, cut your discretionary spending by 30%. Not 100, not 50, 30. You can do 30% without destroying yourself. 30 is survivable. Sarah went home that night and sat at her kitchen table until 2 in the morning with a notebook and 3 months of bank statements. What she found disturbed her in a way she had not expected. The bleed was real. $223 a month in subscriptions she had forgotten about or stopped using. $64 on coffee purchased outside her own work shifts. $111 in small Amazon purchases, hair ties, a candle, a book she never read, 2 phone cases, a reusable water bottle to replace the reusable water bottle she had lost. $17 here, $22 there. The individual amounts were so small they were almost invisible. Together, they were $416 a month. $416 that entered her checking account and evaporated without a destination, without a return, without her conscious permission. She wrote Clara's 3 circles on a fresh page. She filled in the numbers. She canceled 4 subscriptions before she went to bed. She did not feel triumphant. She felt the specific grief of realizing you have been the source of your own wound. The first month was hard. Saying no to things you have said yes to unconsciously is harder than it sounds because it forces you to look at every small decision and make it deliberately. That friction is uncomfortable. There were days she drove past the drive-thru and thought about the $4 and then kept driving, not because she was disciplined, but because she was angry. And anger, it turned out, was a reasonable substitute for discipline until the real discipline arrived. By the end of month 1, Sarah Jenkins had not fully balanced her budget, but she had stopped the bleeding. Her credit card balance had not grown. That was its own kind of miracle. By the end of month 2, she had redirected $200 into a Roth IRA at Fidelity. She had an investment account for the first time in her adult life. The balance was $200. It was the smallest number that had ever made her feel like something was beginning. By month 3, she sat down with a HUD-approved housing counselor and presented a formal budget plan to her mortgage servicer. She negotiated a loan modification, a lower fixed rate, and extended term that brought her monthly payment down to $1,130. It was not perfect. It added years to her timeline, but it was survivable, and survivable had become a new definition of success. She cut her discretionary spending by 32%. She tracked every transaction with a free app on her phone. She started packing Maya's lunches again. She had stopped because she told herself she didn't have time, and discovered she had time because she made time, because the reason was real now. She kept the coffee shop job through the spring. Every dollar from those closing shifts went to debt first, then to the investment account. The tips that used to feel like extras became the engine. By the end of month 6, her Roth IRA held $2,040. She had never had $2,000 in a dedicated investment account in her entire adult life. She called Clara on a Thursday afternoon to tell her. Clara said, "Good. Don't touch it." She didn't. At the 12-month mark, Sarah Jenkins had done something she would not believe possible standing in that parking lot the previous November. Her mortgage was current, locked at a fixed rate. Her credit card balance was $0, paid off with a combination of the spending cuts and a tax refund she had directed entirely at the debt instead of spending, as she had done in every single previous year. Her Roth IRA held $15,200. She had never had $15,000 in a dedicated investment account in her entire adult life. She had not been given more money. Her salary had not changed. She had not found a scheme or a shortcut. She had done one thing. She had looked at what she was keeping, and then she had decided what that would be. Here is what I want you to hear right now. Not Sarah, you, wherever you are, whatever hour it is, carrying whatever version of the same weight she was carrying. The 50-30-20 rule is not